All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of the Procrastination to Profit Challenge. If you can hear me, drop a 1 in the chat. Beautiful. Awesome. All right. So today we are diving deep into understanding the nervous system. Now, there is only so much that I can share with you over the next hour. I'm going to build on what I teach you today in this session in the bonus session tonight. So if you have not yet done the questionnaire, please make sure that you do the questionnaire. And Sid, can you send the link, the Zoom link in the All Access Pass Voxer? People are asking for it there. So if you have not done that questionnaire yet, go ahead and fill that out. We'll make sure that you get the link to join us at the bonus session because I'm going to be building on what I talk about in the next hour there for you today. So our goal for today is by the end of today, you're going to have a deep understanding of how your nervous system works and why your nervous system is the main piece that is holding you back, okay? This is going to lead us into tomorrow where we start talking about how we actually reprogram things to break the cycle and to create a new future reality. So we're going to do a quick recap of the grand prize and how to get points. We're going to look at the leaderboard standings for today so everybody knows where we're at. We're going to talk about the parts of the nervous system. We're going to look at the polyvagal theory, which I know sounds like a really big word, but I'm going to make it super, super simple. And we're going to talk about stress addiction. And we're going to then move to the VIP Q&A and into the bonus session for those of you who have filled out the questionnaire, and Sid will drop that link for you again so that you can join us. All right. And then I'm going to give you your third task for today. Okay. Yes. So the VIP, I will make sure that you get that before we finish up. Let me just make a note to myself and I'll send it to you as we move over there. All right. And those of you coming to the bonus session, we also have a special invitation for you today. So the person that on Friday has the most number of points, you are going to get a package that retails for $3,649. This is a 3-month coaching package with me. So you'll be working with me one-on-one to help clean out any limiting beliefs, working through that RISE method that we talked about yesterday. We'll go through that one-on-one, so it's super personalized and customized. You're going to get 3 months access to the All Access Pass, and you'll get VIP, excuse me, to our January challenge. The person in second place is going to get 3 months access to the All Access Pass. That's where we're giving you exercises to take yourself through the RISE method. And then you also get opportunities for Voxer support with that and 2 live Q&As a month. Plus you'll get VIP to the next one. If you were to buy that on its own, it would be $352. And third place gets VIP to our next challenge in January, which is $88. So in the school community, you're going to go into the classroom tab and then into the Procrastination to Profit module. From there, there are 7 pre-event tasks. If you comment on each of those 7 pre-event tasks, you just have to say done or whatever Sid has directed you to say on that particular task. You will get 1 point. For doing your homework and your tasks to integrate what you're learning here with us at the end of every day, you will get 1 point for another total of 4. If you come to the bonus session tonight by filling out that questionnaire, you will get 2 additional bonus points. Okay, so how do you get points? You be like Joanna, you go into the school community, you leave your comment, and you'll know that you're your comment has been counted towards your points when I like it. Okay, so I go in once a day and I will go through, like your comment, and update the leaderboard. You only have until Thursday at midnight, so tomorrow at midnight, to finish this off if you want to win that grand prize. So let's look at where everybody is at. We still have Amy in first place at 17 points. By the way, for every friend that you refer to come to the program that actually joins the school community, you need to send us their name so that we can verify that. You will get 2 points per person as well. If they join the community but you haven't told us their name, you can just message Sid or myself. If they join the community but we don't know they come from you, then we can't attribute the points to you. Terusla and Samya are in second place with 13. Jim, Joanna, and Peter sitting in third spot with 9 points. Jacob with 8. Dana with 7. Kelsey with 5. Dan with 3. Heaven and Brooke with 2. Andrea and Sharon also with 2. And then rounding out the last spot, we have Annie Marie, Sam. I think I may have meant to take Dan out of there because he's moved up. Hannah, Mary Lynn, Allison, Sonia, Laura, Lily, and Frederick. So we will see on Friday. I will be announcing on Friday who the winner of each level is. So make sure you get in there and get your stuff done. So a quick refresher. On day 1, we talked about how procrastination is not really the problem, but rather our thoughts, our beliefs, and our identities are what is holding us back. And then all of those combine to create a stress addiction, which we're going to go into depth on today, understanding how stress addiction is happening in your nervous system. We talked yesterday about why affirmations, willpower, and manifesting aren't the place to start. They can be helpful on your journey, but they're not step 1 and they are not step 2. These tools, if we use them alone, they are counterintuitive to how our bodies and our minds function. So we're actually working against ourselves when we just attempt, to use those tools to make change. Instead, while they can be part of the system, we want to start with the RISE method. So R stands for recalibrate the nervous system and reprogramming survival or limiting beliefs. I is for the inner child healing. S is for shifting your identity. And E is expanding your limitations. So we have a lot to get through today, so we're going to dive right in. Everything starts with your nervous system. Okay, so there are a couple different branches of our nervous system. I know you're like, I'm not really here for a biology lesson. I'm going to make this super quick, but I think it's important for you to understand. We have one main branch of our nervous system is the central nervous system. This is our brain and our spinal cord. Okay, then we have the peripheral nervous system, which branches into 2 additional branches of the somatic nervous system. So when I touch my desk and it feels hard, or I feel cold in this office, which I do, I'm wrapped up in a blanket right now, all that information is coming in through my somatic nervous system. Then we have the autonomic nervous system. I like to think of this as the automatic nervous system. We don't consciously have a lot of control over this nervous system unless we learn how to control it, okay? But most people, it is a very unconscious thing for them. And the autonomic nervous system is broken down into 2 more branches. The sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I kind of introduced those yesterday. We'll talk about them in more detail today. And we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, digest, and repair. So we are going to spend all of today talking about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, I just want to preface by saying neither of these are quote unquote bad. In the VIP session yesterday, we talked about how no emotions are bad. They all exist for a reason. They become disempowering when we either suppress them or we don't have the tools to navigate them. Okay, so the sympathetic nervous system, it's going to keep us alive if there is something threatening our life. The parasympathetic nervous system helps us digest our food, helps us repair our body after we go for a long hike or after we go to the gym or anything like that. Okay, so we need both of these systems. We want to be able to use them in their optimal way. Okay, what the challenge is, how our body is supposed to work is not what's actually happening in today's society. So if we get stuck in, and just so you know, we're either in one system or we're in the other. There's no kind of 50-50. We're over here or we're over here. So when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, we go into what's called sympathetic dominance. So now the sympathetic nervous system has taken over, and there are some other things that happen that I'm going to talk about there. When we go into the parasympathetic nervous system, then we go into parasympathetic dominance. And now we're focused on resting, digesting, and repairing. Okay, give me a 1 if you're with me so far. If you're like, cool, this makes sense. You're still awake. Beautiful. All right. So the majority of the population spends at least 70% of their life living in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. How many of you, just so I know, because I've talked to a couple of you in the last couple of days, how many of you, give me a 2 in the chat, have some sort of health condition? It could be an autoimmune condition. It could be a health issue, things like that. Okay, so if you have especially an autoimmune condition or a chronic health condition, your nervous system is currently living in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Okay, once you start to come out of there, that's interesting. I have had numerous people message me this week about their teeth being an issue. So there's something going on right there. But chronic health conditions are all linked back to too much stress on the nervous system. In fact, recent studies have shown that people who have chronic health, or 70% or more of chronic health conditions and autoimmune diseases, are linked back to the body carrying too much stress, which means we're stuck in that sympathetic dominance. When people come work with us and they go through the RISE method, we're obviously unloading all of that stress. Yesterday, we talked about that tank being full. We unload as much of that as we possibly can. And we have seen people miraculously, I'm going to use the air quotes there because I don't think it's that miraculous, but their doctors have said it is. They miraculously heal from things like cancer, type 2 diabetes, fibromyalgia, liver disease. We've seen improvements in Parkinson's syndrome, anxiety, depression, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, sleep apnea, heart murmurs, and there was another one that I'm forgetting. But those are things that like my direct clients have seen over the last couple years. Okay, so fight, flight, freeze, fawn. What are they? This is a spectrum. Okay, so fight is the first response that we go into when the sympathetic nervous system is activated from parasympathetic. So this is the low end of the stress scale. This is basically activated to allow us to confront the threat or the stressor to eliminate it. So we get that rush of energy inside of us and we step up to confront the threat. In this state, when we are in fight response, we perceive the world around us as being more aggressive, confrontational, and threatening than what it actually is. So a couple months ago, it was like June or something, Sid was sitting in here in our office doing some work for our podcast. And I was sitting out in the living room attempting to get some work done with our son. I think our babysitter was sick that day, so we had not planned on having to also do childcare. We had a number of things we had to get done. And my son decided that was the day he was going to start having an attitude. Up until then, he'd never had an attitude. But that day he was like, nope, I'm going to launch into my terrible twos like 2 months early, Mom. And so those of you who have kids, you know the fun of the terrible twos. So I'm overwhelmed, right? My nervous system is very much dysregulated. And Sid says, hey, can you send me this thing for the podcast? So I send it to him in Facebook message and he says, thanks. And like in the future, when you send it, can you just drop it in a Google Drive or a Google Doc so it's easier for me to find? That's exactly how he said it. Here's what I heard. You're such an idiot. Next time you send it to me, can you not be a moron and like put it in a Google Doc? He did not say it that way, but that was how I perceived it because my nervous system was dysregulated and I was in fight response. So when we go into fight response, we then start to feel angry. We then become defensive and we feel the need to justify our thoughts and our actions. So I responded with, well, you never asked me for it that way. So if that's the way you want it, then ask for it that way. And he was like, I know, like I'm just trying to create a better system moving forward. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dysregulated. I need to take a minute. I need to go do my exercises. So when we are in fight response, we are going to perceive everything from potentially anybody as being way more aggressive, way more confrontational, way more threatening, way more blaming and shaming than what it actually is. We can perceive it this way from our spouses or our partners, from our friends, from our clients, from our bosses, etc. Okay, nobody is safe from being seen as being overly confrontational. If our stress response continues to rise, the threat doesn't go away, we are then going to move into flight response. So the agitation is still rising, the threat is still present. We in flight response are going to perceive things as being more rushed and scarce. How many of you, by the way, just going back to fight for a moment, have had a similar situation to what I had with my husband? Put a 1 in the chat, where it's like, you realized afterwards that maybe they weren't like blaming you or shaming you or coming at you the way that you thought they were. Okay. Give me a 2 if you've ever been in a situation where you feel like, I don't have enough time to gather the information to make this decision. Like I have to make the decision yesterday and like everything is like coming at me and I don't have enough time to get everything done. I don't have enough time to figure things out. I just don't have enough time. Okay, that is the flight response. So I want you to be able to identify what these feel like in your body so that you know when you're there. Okay, fear starts to kick in here and we do one of 2 things. We either physically flee, right? So we may run away. There was a point in time a couple years ago where like everything wrong was going on in our life. Sid and I had an old mentor that was like attempting to cancel us and had turned like, was publicly putting us on blast over nothing on social media, but making up all these lies about us. Had his COO at the time, his chief operating officer, like literally physically threaten our lives. And this was an ex-gangbanger. So, when a gangbanger is like, I know where you live and I'm going to pay you a visit, that's really not something you want to hear. And my grandma was passing away at the same time. And so it was like all of these things happening. And I would go, Sid would find me sitting in our walk-in closet, like under my clothes in the very corner. I would just go like, that was my safe space. When it all became too much, I just go hide in my closet. Okay, so we might physically flee. How many of you have done that? Maybe it's not your closet, maybe it's your bed. Anybody ever want to wrap yourself, like burrito yourself in your bed? Yeah, that's what that physical fleeing is. Or a lot of people will mentally and emotionally flee. So they dissociate. Give me a 3 if you've ever dissociated. You just mentally check out. You're not paying attention. You are like, your mind is somewhere miles and miles away. Okay, that's the flight response. If the threat stays present and doesn't disappear, the agitation continues to increase, we move into freeze and or fawn response. So in the freeze response, this is the far end where now our system is completely overwhelmed and begins to shut down. Okay, so the threat is still there. We now begin to perceive things as more hopeless and helpless. We see ourselves as being more powerless than what we actually are. This is where depression also sits. Okay, depression is a freeze response in the body. So we start to become disconnected from our bodies and our emotions. And neuroscientists at Stanford University actually discovered that there's this thing called what they called the quitting circuit. So when our system becomes too overwhelmed, it'll shut down. And when that quitting circuit is activated, we actually lose the ability to use our muscles to like move our arms and legs. So a lot of people who have experienced sexual abuse or physical abuse in any way, they will describe like this paralysis, this physical freeze that takes over them where they're like, I didn't fight back. You know, maybe I wanted to be in that situation because I didn't fight back, or whatever it is. But it's not that you wanted whatever was happening to happen. It's that this is basically the play dead response. Your nervous system took over. And I want you to know your nervous system's number one goal is to keep you alive. And so in that moment, it thought your best chance of survival was to play dead. And so you just completely lose the ability to move your body. What is more common, and this is where procrastination sits, is a mental or emotional freeze, what we call a functional freeze. Procrastination is actually a sign from your nervous system that you are so overwhelmed, your system is so overloaded that it's going into shutdown mode. And so you go into a mental and or emotional paralysis. Give me a 1 in the chat if you've ever had a time when you do something like this. You know you need to go and make dinner. You know you need to go and get that thing done. You know you need to, go do some work or whatever it is, but you just like keep scrolling. You're like, oh, I know I need to get up. You just keep scrolling, right? That's a functional freeze. Now, sometimes you'll just have the functional freeze. Sometimes you'll have the fawn response with it. I shared some yesterday of my postpartum experience. And now that I talk about it, there's a lot of people who were around me during that time that were like, I had no idea. I had no idea that you were in like this freeze state. And it's because I didn't just go into freeze, I also went into fawn. And so in the fawn response, we feel safe by prioritizing the needs of others or by pasting that smile on our face, right? I didn't feel safe asking for help at that time. We had some family stuff going on. So I just went, I'm okay. I'm good. I wasn't crying, so people assumed that I was okay. So we can be a people pleaser. We prioritize the needs of others. We're looking to make other people feel more comfortable with where we're at. We might even become a chameleon, which means we act however we need to act in that situation. So if it's socially acceptable to just paste the smile on our face, we will. Okay. So of these 4 responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, where do you find yourself sitting most often? Pop it in the chat for me. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fight, okay. Freeze, fight, freeze, okay. If you're in the fight response, you might also find yourself starting fights with other people, like kind of nitpicking at people. All right, so I want you to know that this stress response, the sympathetic nervous system, is activated both by real threats and perceived threats. So a real threat, we were hiking over the summer in the Smokies out to this spot where they still have this home of these 6 sisters who lived in like this 2-room home, and you can hike out there. And we were the only ones on the hike. And partway through the hike, Sid said, this is prime bear country. And then we kind of like turned a corner and there was a bear about 30 yards away. And Sid fully went into sympathetic nervous system. And I just was still in my parasympathetic. I pulled out my phone, took a little video of this bear, and then we kept walking. But Sid was like, there's a bear, we need to start going, right? So that's a real threat. A perceived threat, give me a 1 if you've ever not posted on social media because you're worried what people will say. Or you've ever not asked for money on a sale for your services because you didn't want to appear greedy, right? Or something like that. That is a perceived threat. So here's what could happen if I blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it doesn't even have to be true. Your worst case scenario thinking, give me a 2 if you've ever done that, worst case scenario thinking. That worst case scenario thinking can trigger your sympathetic nervous system to kick in. Okay, so potential threats for our nervous system are things like deadlines, crying or screaming children. They don't even have to be your own. We were at this indoor play place today, and we went to TJ Maxx after on the way out. And as we were leaving TJ Maxx, somebody else's kid was crying and screaming, and I could feel like my nervous system kick into gear. Okay, so it doesn't even have to be your own kid. Angry, disappointed spouses, parents, bosses, coworkers, friends, an experience that reminds you of a past trauma. So maybe you go, back to a school and it's not even the school that you grew up in, but all of a sudden you remember all the bullying from when you were in school. Being bullied or canceled, standing out from the crowd, money. These are just some examples of potential threats for the nervous system. Okay, so let's look at the vagus nerve now, because the vagus nerve is basically the gearbox that moves us from sympathetic to parasympathetic and back and forth. So your vagus nerve starts up in your brain. It's a cranial nerve. I'm not going to test you on this, so you don't have to write down the biology, but for those who are biology nerds like me, just throwing it out there, it's actually called the wandering nerve because it is the longest cranial nerve in the body, and it innervates, it connects to all the major organs. So it starts in our brain, connects to our heart and lungs, and plays a major role in connecting with our digestive tract. Okay, now within the vagus nerve, there are 2 branches. There's the ventral branch, which means the front branch, and there's the dorsal branch, which is the back branch. So we're going to think of our nervous system like this bell curve for a second, our vagus nerve like this bell curve. And there are 3 different zones that our vagus nerve can be activated to. So the first zone that our vagus nerve can be in is our social engagement system. Okay, in this system, we feel like being safe and social. So we feel safe to be our authentic self. We feel safe to share our opinions, to ask for our needs to be met. We feel safe to be who we are, which also means we then feel like socializing and being around other people. Give me a 1 if you're an introvert, just so I know who my fellow introverts are. All right, so those of you who are introverted, only 2, interesting, okay, we got a couple more. So those of you who are introverts, how many of you ever make plans with friends and you feel like really excited about the plans, and then all of a sudden the plans roll around and your nervous system is overwhelmed and you're like, why did I make those plans, right? Give me a 2 if that's ever happened to you. Yeah, and you're like, how do I get out of this now? So you made the plans when you were in your social engagement system. And then by the time the plans roll around, if you're not looking forward to it, you're no longer in your social engagement system. So then the next zone that we can be in is the fight or flight zone. So we talked about what those 2 are, and then we have the freeze and the fawn zone. So the ventral vagal branch is the social engagement system. Once a stressor or a threat is introduced, then the sympathetic nervous system is activated, and so that starts to turn on the vagus nerve. And then by the time we get to the freeze response, we are in the dorsal vagal branch. Okay, now we're going to look at this from a slightly different perspective. We all have at any given time a different capacity of what we are capable to hold. Okay, so you can also imagine that if this bell curve was flipped, I'm guessing you've all heard, give me a thumbs up, you've all heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Give me a thumbs up if you've heard that. So if we were to flip this bell curve, that would be our cup, okay? So when we're in the social engagement system, our cup is 71 to 100% full, which we call the green zone. So green means go. We have more capacity to do big things, to do things outside of our comfort zone, to take action, to, take on more responsibility for that day. The fight or flight zone is when our cup is 31 to 70% full. This is the yellow zone, right? Yellow means slow down, proceed with caution, right? We might need to make some shifts here. We might need to delegate some things or offload some things from our to-do list for that day because our capacity is not as high. And then when we're in the freeze, we're in the red zone. Red means stop. Our cup is almost empty. At best, our cup is only 30% full here. So the first exercise that I want you all to start doing, and this is going to make a major difference in your life once you make this a regular routine, is checking in with yourself and saying, what is my capacity right now? Am I in the green, yellow, or red zone? And what percentage, right? Because if you're in like the high red zone, so maybe 50 to 70%, then you can take on a little bit more than if you're in the low red zone, like 31 to 49%. Okay. If you're in the red zone, then we definitely know that we need to make some adjustments. This is where the system starts to break down and get sick, right? Maybe that's through the flu, maybe that's depression, anxiety, maybe that's fibromyalgia, liver disease, etc., etc. The body can't maintain that level anymore. And so one of the first things that we need to do to start regulating our nervous system is knowing where we sit at any given moment. And then from there, we can take it further. If every time you talk to your friend Bob, you feel your capacity drop, maybe you start the day in the green zone, and by the time you're done talking to Bob, you're in the red zone. Give me a 1 if you know somebody in your life that's like this. Maybe currently or maybe in the past, but it's like every time their name pops up on your phone, you feel the capacity like draining. You feel that anxiety rising, right? So you need to figure out, do I need to set boundaries with this person or do I need to let this person go? If I have a client who's consistently lowering my capacity, I'll just let them know, hey, this is not a good arrangement for either of us. And so I think it's just best if we part ways. I wish you all the best, but I'm just not the person to support you here. Okay, so that's the first exercise that I want you to start doing. Now, I want you to know that as we go through life, we will go up through this, right? We talked about this is like the ladder that we climb. We go from social engagement system to fight, to flight, and then up to freeze. A lot of you said you were in the freeze zone. Put a 1 in the or a 2 in the chat again if you're in the freeze. I remember who else there. So we have to come back down the ladder the same way. You can't just jump from freeze to social engagement. And so a lot of people get frustrated and then kind of overstimulate their nervous system by getting frustrated that they're not, moving from freeze to joy in like 2 seconds flat. We have to go from freeze to flight, flight to fight, and then fight down to the social engagement system. The longer you've been in freeze, the longer that's going to take to get out. It doesn't have to take forever. The more consistent you are, the faster it's going to happen, and more consistent with the exercises we're going to talk about tomorrow, the faster it's going to happen. But there is a process we have to go through. And so the sooner we get started, the better. Okay? Now, I want you to know that, again, this is why willpower and the things that we talked about yesterday aren't working for you. Because if you're in freeze, willpower takes a significant amount of mental energy. And if you're in freeze, you don't have that level of energy to muster up. And so you're setting yourself up for failure, and then you keep yourself in freeze because how many of you, give me a 1 in the chat, beat yourself up when you're like, I'm just going to have more willpower today, and then you fall flat, and then you beat yourself up and you're like, well, see? And I've heard from a couple people who are attending this week and a couple other people who decided not to attend. Well, in the past, I've never made change, so why would this be any different? Or something like that, right? How many of you have thought that? Give me a 2. But in the past, I've signed up for something, or, you know, I've started to do the work and nothing changed, so why would I do it again? And so we create this self-fulfilling prophecy where we keep ourselves stuck and freeze by beating ourselves up that, you know, a decade's worth of baggage or multiple decades worth of baggage that's gotten us to this point isn't gone in 2 seconds flat. Okay? I'm telling you this because I want to manage your expectations. The sooner you start doing nervous system work, the sooner you start seeing results. You will start seeing results fairly quickly. With the RISE method, people start seeing results as quickly as the first session, but that doesn't mean it's all fixed in one session, okay? If it was, I would be charging a lot more. So I want you to know that 80% of communication between the brain and body goes from the body to the brain. So 80% of your thoughts are coming from messages that you receive from your body first, not the other way around. And most people think it's the other way around, and so they use mindset tools. Give me a 2 in the chat if you have believed or thought you needed more or better mindset tools. You've gone for mindset tools in the past to make change, and I don't blame you for that because that's what most people tell you you need. That's what I believed I needed at the beginning until I found out that mindset tools absolutely play a role. But if we start there, we're making the battle harder for ourselves. Okay? So what happens is our body is going to send our brain signals. And then our brain is going to interpret those signals and respond. So you might feel your heart start to race, and then your brain gets that signal and says, ooh, this is anxiety. We're going to respond. We have to figure out what or who to blame for this feeling. Okay? So when we're living in survival mode or stress addiction, we are more likely to misinterpret those signals that we're receiving from our body. So we're more likely to receive those signals and say, oh, this means something is wrong. I'm in danger. And then we stay stuck in that sympathetic mode. So we have direct danger signals and we have indirect danger signals. So I want you to think about this question, put your answer in the chat. If I had lots of money, or if you had lots of money, what bad thing do you feel like would happen? So for example, well, I know somebody said to me recently, well, more money, more problems. Obviously, we know some good things are going to happen, but what we're wanting to tap into right now, the reason that if you're not making the money that you want to be making, give me a 1 if you're not making the amount of money that you want to be making. So if you're not making the amount of money that you want to be making, it's because there is a part of you that believes something bad will happen. Okay? So if you were to think about, if I had lots of money, what bad things would happen? What's the answer to that? A risk of losing it, right? Making bad choices. Somebody might try and steal it. What else? What else? More health problems, okay? What else? More responsibility. That's a big one that holds people back. I hear that often. Well, more money means more responsibility. I have to work more. How many of you feel like, well, I have to work hard? I had that one for a long time, right? That money couldn't just flow to me, that I'd have to work hard and I'd have to work long hours. And so we have to reinterpret these signals. Taxes, absolutely. People are like, well, the more money I make, the more taxes I have to pay. Yeah, you might lose your relationship, have to work hard, more stress, become complacent and it'll go away, I'll overspend. So those are all direct danger signals. Stress, get sick, die. I mean, if you feel like if I make more money, I'm going to get stressed, I'm going to get sick, and I'm going to die, why would you make more money? Right? So give me a 1 if you can see why your nervous system is actually pushing away money. Nope, don't want it. Go away. Okay? And then we have indirect danger signals. So the indirect danger signals are actually the bigger problem. We can solve them fairly easily and quickly with the RISE method, but we have to be aware of them, right? And so our indirect danger signals are things like, how many of you have ever shared with somebody something that you wanted? Maybe it had nothing to do with money. Maybe as a kid you were like, for example, as a kid I was like, I want to be a writer one day. I loved writing. And my aunt said to me, well, very few people make a living being a writer. How many of you had something like that? Like, come on, be serious. You can't make a living doing that. Right? So when we say this is the thing that I desire and that gets crushed, and we're told why it can't happen, right? That's an indirect danger signal. Now it's not okay to want things. How many of you have been shamed for something that you want? Oh, why do you need that? Oh, what? So you can be better than everybody else? When I started dating Sid, he drove a Maserati. He drove a Maserati. I drove a $800 beater car that eventually lit on fire one day when I dropped Sid off at the airport. But one of my aunts said to me, oh, well, it must be nice to drive around in a Maserati all the time, but some of us don't have that money. Right? So if you've been shamed, maybe as a kid you were like, I want this Barbie or I want this G.I. Joe. And it was like, oh, how dare you want something so expensive? Right now, our desires come with shame. It's not safe to want what we want. How many of you were ever told that you were too much or too loud or too fill in the blanks, right? So that's another indirect danger signal. Now it's not okay to be our authentic self. How many of you have ever had something good happen? You achieved a goal. This could be, doesn't have to be financially related, but you got something you wanted, you hit that goal, and then something bad happened. So now you have this other shoe syndrome where it's like, I am always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Well, if something good happens, when I first started my coaching business, this woman came to work with me and she held herself at like $99,990 a year. Like she could not break that number. She couldn't hit the 6 figures. And she was like, well, every time I make more money, something bad happens. Somebody close to me dies. There's like a major disaster. So I can't, it's not safe to want more. Right? So these indirect danger signals are signs that we've had from our past saying, here's all the reasons why it's not safe for you. How many of you felt growing up that you had to look after everybody else's needs first to feel safe? So you became the people pleaser, things like that. So now you might not even know what you want because you're so attuned to what everybody else wants that it's not even safe to like check in and say, what do I want? Okay, so these are all indirect danger signals. And when we're already living in survival mode, we are more likely to misinterpret them. Okay? So this is why a lot of mainstream strategies leave us frustrated, is because they're not setting us up for success. Most of the strategies out there are about sending different messages from the brain to the body. And they'll work sometimes because 20% of the communication is from the brain to the body. But it's not going to work the majority of the time, right? How many of you have heard this? Give me a 2. Change your thoughts, change your life. And there is an element of truth to this, But if we're only changing our thoughts to send different messages to the body, we're only going to change 20% of where we're at. So what we need to do is change the signals that the body is sending the brain, and then we need better tools to interpret those signals differently. So the signals we are getting from the body, we are able to interpret differently. Okay, so let's talk about stress addiction. We might go a couple minutes over, my apologies. So every time we have a thought, that thought causes our body to release a hormone or a set of hormones. And that causes us to have feelings and emotions. Okay, those feelings and emotions cause us to have more thoughts of the same quality. So on the average day, we have 60,000 thoughts, or approximately one new thought every 6.5 seconds. 80% of those thoughts are negative that we have every day. 80%. Now, that means for 80% of the day, we are pumping out stress hormones called cortisol and adrenaline, which means for 80% of our day, we feel stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, overstimulated, fear, self-doubt, anger, however it shows up for you. Okay, now here's what's happening. We have these body cells, right? We have skin cells, we have muscle cells, we have all these cells in our body. What all these cells have in common is that they have receptors. And these receptors are where the hormone attaches to have some sort of impact on that cell. This is what our body should look like. Couple receptors, a little bit of cortisol and adrenaline. Again, we have cortisol and adrenaline for a reason. It's not terrible, but when we have it in oversupply for too long, that's when the challenges happen. So when we live in a society that promotes the hustle and grind, that, where busyness and whoever's the most stressed out and whoever's taking the most anxiety medications gets the badge of honor, right? We get all of this cortisol and adrenaline floating around. And the body says, we don't have enough receptors to handle all this. So the body adapts like it always does, and it builds extra receptors. The moment that you build extra receptors on your cells to manage the high cortisol and adrenaline load is the moment that your body is now chemically addicted to stress hormones. So I've been alcohol free for just over a year now. If I was to have a glass of wine, it would take me probably not even one glass to get buzzed. But if I kept drinking one glass of wine, what would happen every night? Eventually I'd need 2 to get the same buzz, right? And then I'd need 4. And this is what happens because adrenaline does give us a little bit of that buzz. It gives us a little bit of that high feeling. So over time, we're going to start needing to produce even more stress hormone to get that buzz. And then we need even more receptors to handle it. Okay. So in stress addiction, our body cells are chemically addicted to stress, chaos, and drama. I want you to think of your nervous system like your emotional thermostat. So if I told you right now that the thermostat in our house is set to 71 degrees, what temperature do you think my house is? Pop your answer in the chat. My house, the thermostat is set to 71. Right. Because you would expect my house to be 71 degrees because that's where my thermostat is set. When you're in stress addiction, and I've, by the way, only ever met one person who wasn't in stress addiction, and this person had already done a lot of work to get out of it. If your emotional thermostat is set to stress and chaos and drama, what do you think you're going to create in your life, your business, your finances, your relationships, your health? Again, from an unconscious perspective, you're doing this, but that's what you're going to create, right? So I said in the VIP session yesterday that entrepreneurs oftentimes are the arsonist and the firefighter. We set fires in business so that we can come in and put it out. How many of you feel like you can only take action in your business when you have no idea how you're going to pay the bills next month? Give me a 1. That's one of the most common ways that this stress addiction shows up in business. I talked to a guy a couple years ago and he said, every time I have the best financial month in my business, I start a fight with my wife. And it's not until I'm sleeping on the couch that night that I realize that I've done it again. Okay? So, like any other addiction, when you start to break stress addiction, there is a withdrawal phase. So if I was a smoker and I just cold turkey quit smoking, I'd be cranky and I'd have cravings, right? If I cold turkey quit drinking, I'd be nauseous, I'd be vomiting, I'd have, cold sweats. Give me a 2 if you've ever broken a sugar addiction. It's not a fun one, right? You get headachy, you're tired, you're cranky. So when you break stress addiction, the withdrawal symptom is self-sabotage. So every time we begin making positive changes, the amount of cortisol that we have decreases. That causes our body to say, hey, we're not getting the amount of cortisol that we want. So our body will attempt to hijack us to bring us back to a state of stress and chaos. So there's 2 ways that this is going to happen. The first is the fast path. So the fast path is going to be activated first. This is where we get ruminating thoughts about the past. Give me a 1 if you've ever had something like this. Your brain all of a sudden is like, hey, do you remember that time in 2nd grade when you fell over in front of the entire school and everybody laughed at you? You should think about that right now. You should really focus in on how crappy that felt. Okay? We go into worst case scenario thinking, and then we get the intrusive thoughts. A couple years ago, a client that I had been working with, when she first started working with me, she thought about dying every day. Not because she wanted to die, she wasn't suicidal, but she just was so deeply unhappy with her life that she was like, maybe it would just be better off if I wasn't here. We went through the RISE method. She was feeling good, right? She lives in California. She's driving down the Pacific Coast Highway one day, wind blowing through her hair. She's driving her Mustang. Favorite song comes on the radio. Blue skies, sun, ocean on one side of her. And all of a sudden her brain is like, I wonder what would happen if I just drove into this cement barrier. Okay, that intrusive thought came up. This is the fast path. It's attempting to hijack our thoughts to bring us back to worst case scenario thinking, to bring us back to intrusive thinking, to get that cortisol hit. So moving forward, when this happens, you're going to say, okay, this is the fast path. I've been making positive change. I'm going to come back to my nervous system tools, which we're going to go through tomorrow. Okay. If the fast path doesn't work, we've got the slow path. So we have this part of our brain called the hypothalamus. This is like the grandfather of your hormone system, and it's constantly monitoring how much cortisol you have. Monitors all your hormones, but for the sake of this training, it's monitoring your cortisol. So it's going, last week, they had this much cortisol. 5 days ago, they had this much cortisol. 3 days ago, they had this much cortisol. Yesterday, they had this much cortisol. Today, their cortisol levels have dropped. So it's going to notice that decrease in cortisol levels. And then it's going to activate the pituitary gland, which is also in the brain. The pituitary gland is going to send a message to the adrenals, which are small little glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And then your adrenals are going to start producing cortisol and adrenaline. So what's going to happen is your heart will start to race. You'll start breathing faster. You'll get those butterflies in your stomach. You'll feel like somebody's sitting on your chest. You'll get the sweaty palms. Now your brain is your body is sending that message to your brain, and your brain is going to go, what or who can I blame this anxiety on? And we find something external to blame it on instead of recognizing, this is my body attempting to hijack me. I'm going to come back to my tools that we'll talk about tomorrow. I'm going to come back to my tools to regulate myself again. Okay. So most of the mainstream tools are what we call top down. I need my brain to send different messages to my body. If you do that, you're not going to have such a good time. You'll get some shifts, but it's not going to be major life-changing shifts. If we do bottom up, so we teach our body to send different messages to our brain, it's going to be better. The best combo, though, is a combo of the two. How can I reinterpret the signals that I'm getting and then send a different response to my body? And how can I get my body to send different responses to my brain? Okay. Yes, I'll let you know where to find the recording. So this is what happens when you combine top-down strategies with bottom-up strategies. It feels like a whole new world opens up for you, a new level of peace, a new level of awareness. You stop those old patterns like the emotional eating, like picking at your scalp. You might even find that you can breathe and sleep better. You can go on and have your first 6-figure quarter ever. You might go from having to drive Uber at Christmas to make sure you have enough money for groceries to within just 5 months having June ended up being a $35,000 month for her, and she went on to do 6 figures for the first time ever in her business that year. Okay. So this is what can happen. This is what's waiting on the other side of having top-down plus bottom-up strategies. So tomorrow we are going to be talking about going from stuck to speed, how we can lower friction for faster progress. So we're going to be talking about the tools that you need to start building momentum and breaking the cycle and engaging the power of your subconscious mind and your nervous system. We are not done tonight. If you want to join us for the bonus session, just make sure that you have done that questionnaire, and I'll make sure that you get the link to join us. We're going to jump on right away. We'll open it up for a little bit of VIP Q&A. We'll do the bonus session. We'll come back to Q&A at the end. If you would like to upgrade to VIP so that you can get lifetime access to the replays of this training, so that you can also join us in December for a VIP day where we're going to help you build out your first quarter plan so that you can start hitting your goals in Q1 of 2025. That's what our VIP day is going to be. You get an hour of VIP coaching at the end of every one of these sessions. So today, tomorrow, and Friday, you'll get that extra hour. You can hop on with me for 15 minutes at the beginning before we hop on to the main training to ask any questions that have come up. In February, we're going to be running our next mini mind called Anxiety Detox. And this is going to be either 4 or 6 weeks, but we're going to be focused 100% on getting rid of anxiety, reprogramming those circuits in the mind. You're also going to get VIP to our next challenge in January. And then we're going to give you a couple replays of old programs, our Momentum Mastery Meditation series, our Fearless Mastery Masterclass and Exercise, Complete Confidence Masterclass, 6-figure money mindset course, 6-figure energetics course. I'm going to mail you a copy of my book, Stop Being a Selfish Bitch. You're going to get 3 months access to the all access pass and 3 months Voxer support. So as you're going through and you are implementing these tools, you'll be able to reach out in Voxer and get support. So Sid just shared the link for that in the chat. So go ahead and upgrade there if you have not already. This is everything you're going to get. It's only $88. So your action tasks, this should say day 3. I thought we were on day 4 for some reason, but based on what you discovered today, what are the things that are overwhelming your nervous system, keeping you stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? These questions will also be in the school community. So you can take a screenshot or you can go there. What percentage of your life do you feel like you're currently spending in that social engagement system? And I want you to start to connect to how does it feel? When you're in that social engagement system, how do you show up? What are you thinking about? How does it feel in your body? We're going to do the same thing with the fight system. What percentage do you feel like you're spending there? How does it feel in your body? What are you thinking about when you're in that? Yeah, absolutely. If you invite friends, you also will get points to help you win the grand prize as well. What percentage of your life do you spend in flight? How does it feel in your body? What kinds of things do you think about when you're in flight? And then same with freeze and fawn. Okay, so that is it for this training today. If you just filled out the questionnaire, and I'll share that link for you one more time, I will be checking and I will make sure that you get the link to join us for the bonus session. We're going to hop over there to the bonus session and VIP now. And everybody else, I will see you tomorrow. Have an amazing day. And Chandra, I will send you the link.